What does it mean to forgive yourself, especially in the wake of infidelity? Is self-forgiveness only for the wayward spouse, or is it an assignment for all of us? If you would have asked me that question before D-Day, I would have said without hesitation, self-forgiveness? That's on the unfaithful. Not because I saw myself as the oh-so-perfect wife, but because I believed that the person who chose to stray would be the only one needing to seek forgiveness. While I suppose that may be the case in some marriages, that self-forgiveness is only applicable to the wayward spouse, that was not the case in mine. The reality is self-forgiveness can be relevant for both partners, and if it's relevant, it's going to be essential. Without it, the recovery process stalls. Self-forgiveness is what allows you to move beyond the paralyzing shame, take true accountability, and begin the difficult but necessary work to restore your life. Today, I want to talk to you about just that, what it looks like to forgive yourself, not your spouse, affair partners, or anyone else caught in the crosshairs. We'll save that tall order for another vlog on another day. I'm going to share what my journey of self-forgiveness looked like as a betrayed spouse. I'll also be sharing perspectives that I gathered from other betrayed and wayward spouses in my life. Let's dive in. When the D-Day grenade went off in my life, I wasn't just consumed by hatred for my husband, I had plenty left over for myself as well. But Candace, you're the betrayed spouse. Why would you suddenly hate yourself? Because I felt so incredibly stupid. See, I wasn't blindsided like some of you might have been. I had accused my husband of being unfaithful on and off for years. But instead of feeling relieved when the truth came out, I was furious with myself for every moment that I allowed my spot-on gut instincts to be silenced by his bottomless supply of plausible explanations. Unfortunately, he had the help of a couple very mediocre marriage counselors who dismissed my concerns with a, "Well, did you ask him?" as if it never occurred to them that he could be lying to the both of us. Before D-Day, I went into full CSI mode more times than I care to admit. I'm not sure if this is going to sound impressive or crazy, but here goes. Yes, I lint brushed the inside of his car. And yes, I found long brown hair. Guess who else has long brown hair? Me and my 2 daughters. Yes, I went through laundry, work bags, credit card transactions, bedroom, and office furniture. Despite my ability to play an award-winning role in countless sessions of good cop, bad cop, I never confronted him with anything he couldn't talk his way out of. Leslie Hardy, author of our Harboring Hope curriculum for betrayed spouses, has a phrase I absolutely love. Coulda, shoulda, mighta, woulda. Meaning the things that with the benefit of hindsight now become glaringly obvious. So what was on my coulda, shoulda, mighta, woulda list? Candace, why didn't you buy a tracker and put it in his car? Now this was before Apple AirTags, but I failed to make the mental leap that regular, non-crime fighting people can purchase tracking devices. Quick public service announcement, putting tracking devices in cars is illegal without consent. But that was not a consideration my brain was making at the time. Cell phone records. Why didn't I tap into that treasure trove of evidence before D-Day? Not just for the call logs, because perhaps the wayward spouse has an acceptable reason to make phone calls to this person, but because each call that they make or receive ties them to the nearest cell phone tower. It will mark their exact location with a nice little date and time stamp. Candace, why did you wait so long to contact a private investigator? So much of what I would go on to do within 2 weeks of D-Day, I beat myself up for not doing years earlier. My therapist offered an answer that didn't quite fit for me, but might fit for some other betrayeds out there. She said, maybe you didn't want to do those things, perhaps even on a subconscious level, because you were afraid of finding out the truth. Nope. I was hell-bent on figuring it out, which is why I continued to emotionally beat myself up with more thoughts like, why didn't I just show up to the company Christmas party that I was suddenly told I couldn't attend after being invited for the past 6 years? Here's a really low-risk one that I was furious with myself for not doing. Why didn't I show up at one of the hotels where he was supposedly on a business trip? If he was alone, I could have played it off as a nice little surprise visit. If I was right, I could have cut years off of my story. I'm sure you're picking up on the theme here. I was stuck in a rumination loop for close to 2 years until I was finally able to reach a place of acceptance. Acceptance that I was only capable of making decisions with information I had at the time. Accepting the fact that I didn't know that I was going to need to become a detective or a forensic accountant. In a nutshell, acceptance of how poorly I treated myself after it all came crashing down. Another betrayed spouse shared with me that he had to forgive himself for the resentments that he acquired and for the damaging actions he took once the infidelity was exposed. Some betrayed spouses can cause a great deal of destruction to themselves and/or others. There's a saying that can ring true: hurt people hurt people. This may lead to a list of things that betrayeds may need to forgive themselves for. These can include revenge affairs, along with a host of other ways we can physically or emotionally become human wrecking balls. Okay, let's shift to the wayward spouse learning to forgive themselves. I'll be the first one to admit that in early recovery, Candace thought, I hope he never forgives himself, because I mistakenly believed that if he never forgave himself, he would always carry the weight of this with him, and somehow that would magically translate into him never doing this again. I was wrong. That's not how this works. It is essential for the wayward partner to eventually be able to forgive themselves. Now, please hear me when I say forgive does not mean forget. But if they maintain a mentality that says, I screwed up my life and my marriage, I'll always just be a screw up, that hopelessness and shame spiral can set the wayward spouse speeding down the road to relapse instead of getting onto the path of recovery. One person I spoke with shared, I had to forgive myself for not knowing how to handle things in my history. I had to take a 30,000-foot view of my life and see how I got into this mess. Now, please don't think for 1 second that this person or myself are about to offer excuses. However, it is fair to note what we call contributing factors that may have come into play. For example, some of the wayward spouses I spoke with were abused as children. Without proper recovery, forgiving oneself for not knowing what to do, and healing from those wounds, the wounds can continue to fester and often lead to continued poor choices and relational brokenness. One individual shared that she had spent years living a double life, portraying perfection while shielding her true self from her spouse. She had to forgive herself for not allowing herself to be known, for cheating herself and her husband out of true intimacy. The turning point in her journey to forgiveness was finally revealing her authentic self to him. She described how it became about embracing her brokenness and imperfections, allowing herself to show up with honesty and vulnerability. She let him into all the mess, showing him not only who she was, but also demonstrating her commitment to the person she aspired to be. Another person I spoke with added, I had to forgive myself for failing. She said, in the beginning, the damage was all I could see, but I had to step back and ask, what else am I? Yes, I was unfaithful, but that wasn't all I was or all I had been. It couldn't forever define me. I started with 3 steps: facing the truth, grieving the costs, and then letting it go. Not because it didn't matter, but because I couldn't keep carrying it. As long as I wore it as a badge, just stuck in condemnation and regret, I couldn't move forward, and neither could those around me. She added, relationships couldn't grow. I couldn't be a wife, a mother, a coworker, a daughter, or anything else as long as I only saw myself as an unfaithful. She said, it took time, but I accepted that while I can't change the past, I can change my relationship with it. And as I moved into forgiveness, others could as well. I asked a coworker who's been leading recovery groups for over 10 years, what do you say to someone who says, I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive myself? He said, don't try to forgive yourself now. Start with focusing on how you got there. Another added, don't give yourself a deadline. Acknowledge this is going to be a process. Celebrate the wins, no matter how small, along the way. I absolutely love this part. He said, develop pride in freeing yourself from that behavior, gratitude for what it has taught you, and the strength that it revealed within you. When I asked my husband how he began to forgive himself, he said he knew from the start it was going to be a long journey. No quick fix, no straight line, just time, patience, and the courage to face himself. He shared along the way that he anchored himself to 3 core commitments. Number 1, a daily dedication to making the next right decision. Because no matter how far off track he'd gone, he realized that he could still choose every single day to do the next thing that felt honest, productive, and good. That small act of agency gave him hope. 2, radical ownership of his past. He told me, if I don't own my past, how can I ever create my future? For him, accountability wasn't punishment. It was power. By owning his story, he could finally face who he had been, understand how he got there, and then clearly see where change was going to be non-negotiable. Boundaries and safety weren't optional anymore. They were essential. And lastly, number 3, doing the actual work. In his words, I got myself into this mess, and it's going to be on me to get myself out. That meant asking himself the hard, uncomfortable questions. It meant seeking help through courses, therapy, and self-reflection. For the first time in a very long time, it meant having honest conversations with me. It meant committing over and over again to being someone he himself could love and respect. There is a path to forgiveness, and getting there is most certainly a process. It's not a one and done. It's a rinse and repeat. You take a step, then you take another. Sometimes you circle back and take that other step again, and that's okay. That's what forgiveness looks like. It's not a destination. It's not a single moment. It's an essential journey.